Let's say the ticker comes across. The Arizona Cardinals now have pick 11 and 23 and a bunch of other picks. But right now, all eyes move from pick 4. You pour one out for Sweet Baby Marv and you reassess, which is what we do on this show, like a couple big boys. We're going to talk about our 5 best realistic options at pick 11. I'm going to defer to my co-host. I have not seen his big 5. Bo Brock, go ahead, get us started.
You're so gracious. Let's check it out, Damon Dog. My God, what a graphic. That's gorgeous. My top options at 11. Now, this is also going to be based on, are they going to be available? I think there's some guys that you can just kind of scoff and say, yeah, I don't see them getting that far, and that's fine. But I've got Terrion Arnold, the corner out of Alabama, as my number 5 option. His work ethic, it's unmatched at a school like Alabama. I mean, a guy that was getting into the facility around 3:30 in the morning, no one's going to outwork him. I think as far as the skill set, the athleticism, it's right where you want it to be. I think he's a guy that you can absolutely look at as an outside corner. Now, I don't have him as my top corner. And before we get to that, I'm going to go to 4 here. My number 4 option is Rome Odunze. This is a big if he's available at 11, but I think if he is and you've traded down, this is a guy that you run to the podium for. The 6'3" playmaker out of Washington, statistically, analytically, everything you're looking for. Rome Odunze is that he's competitive. He's one of the few top 3 receivers, the only top 3 receiver that chose to work out at the combine. I like that. Number 3, Quinyon Mitchell. Getting back more is like who would be available. The corner out of Toledo saw him, got some eyes on him, talked to him at the Senior Bowl. He's as competitive as they come. He made sure to answer all the question marks that organizations had about him playing against Power 5 school players and matching up. Would he match up physically? And I think he answered those questions. I think he's the top corner in this draft. So if you can get him at 11, that's great. But then it comes down to it only if some of the top tier defensive 7, front 7 guys are off the board. And I've got number 2, Byron Murphy II out of Texas, award daddy. I know that'd be tough for a fan base to take that you're taking a defensive tackle. But when you look at who was the most sought after free agents this offseason and why, you want to get your opportunity to select one of your own. And Byron Murphy is that guy in this draft. And then they've done nothing at the edge. So I'm going to go number 1 would be Dallas Turner, who's in the mix to be the top edge in this draft out of Alabama. And remember Monty doing his little shimmy after he ran a sub 4, he ran a 4.40. Dallas Turner's got all the skills that you want. And you could get 11. He's a nice little follow-up to his former teammate, Will Anderson Jr. last year. I think Dallas Turner is a really talented kid.
I like 1 or 2 of your selections. I think that list would be, while realistic, very disappointing for Cardinal fans. Ozzy 221. We're going to pass on Marvin for Quinyon Mitchell. This has got to be the worst thing I've ever heard.
Come on. If that's how, if you can't, there's no nuance to it that you're not taking consideration the haul and you're like, oh, it's Marv for Quinyon Mitchell straight up, then I don't know what to tell you. If you can't see that it's more than just the 11th overall pick, we're talking about the top 5 guys who could be available there. Sorry, you don't like good cornerbacks.
If I'm with the chat, if they take Quinyon Mitchell at 11, I need to be carried out of Gila River Resorts and Casinos. So we got Bo's list, and again, I like Dallas Turner. Spoiler alert, he's on my list. I think everything else is different, and I'm going to go a different direction. And I'm going to go not necessarily for immediate needs. I want value. Brian Thomas Jr. at 11 is not the worst thing in the world. When you hear about the rise in the former LSU running mate of Malik Neighbors, who is not on this list, it's not realistic. I would have no problem with Brian Thomas Jr. at 11. I think that the Cardinals pass on a receiver at 11, shit gets real fast. Like, what are you doing? What's happening with 23? Who's available, right? You're in the slums then with everybody else. Are you taking an Orlando Franklin? Are you going to go, a Troy Franklin? Are you going to go Xavier Legette? Are you a lad's lad with our guy Damon Dog? Like, none of those guys are of the top 4. So I think if you have a chance to sniff out one of the big 4, you got to go do it. So Brian Thomas Jr., you could say that's an overdraft. I have no issue with that. Dallas Turner, Bo, as you mentioned, best defensive player in the draft. You get him in 11. That's good value. Like, you say what you want. People saying, oh, I can't believe we're going to take a defender with our first pick in an offensive rich draft. Dallas Turner's a top 5 pick in most any other draft. He comes from an NFL factory in Alabama. He was a running mate of Will Anderson Jr. I think he's got a ceiling of a guy, 12 to 14 sacks per year. He was a combine phenom. He checks all the boxes. We know the Cardinals like him. Would have no issue with that. Now we're going to get up to the big 3. I think Fuaga and Joe Alt, whomever their preference is, if they're in striking distance, I think the Cardinals would make a play, especially for Joe Alt. But I can tell you right now, the acquisition of Jonah Williams, which I like, will not prevent this team, especially, Bo, if they're thinking long-term, to pass on a top tackle in this draft. Do you agree with that? Because I'm going to tell you right now, their moves in the draft, if they trade down, would suggest they're playing the long game. Well, Jonah Williams is on a 2-year contract. Joe Alt can play guard for a year. Fuaga can play guard for a year. They want to build a fortified wall in front of Kyler Murray. You just figure this shit out later. If Fuaga or Joe Alt is the best player available and you love said player, you need to take them. Number one's probably a pipe dream. Rome Odunze's not making it to pick 11. Does somebody like a Tennessee who Austin Ford has a relationship with, or in Atlanta, who probably wants to acquire more picks, do you make a call to them and you jump Chicago? Chicago will take Rome Odunze if he's there. Chicago might try to trade up for Rome. I think it would be very difficult outside of parting, God forbid, with pick 35 to get Rome Odunze. So then you're just watering down what you were going to do with Marvin. So there's not a scenario in which I think he gets there. I'm putting that this is a pipe dream at number 1. Really, 2 through 5 are the realistic options for me. And then probably Byron Murphy, the second, tied for 5th with Brian Thomas Jr., Bo.
Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of those guys, 4 or 5, are all projected to be within the top 10. So yeah, they look really good at 11, and that's easy. And like Brian Thomas Jr., I mean, Spielberger had him going 12 today, and that's the highest I've seen him go. And I just don't think it's as watered down as you think. Like, this is a deep wide receiver draft. This is like, how often are we running through the simulator and we're sitting there in the 2nd round, 3rd round, and we're like, man, there's a ton of guys. Like, you can wait and you can get some talented players at the wide receiver position. And it's a true testament to how great this draft is.
It is.
That's why I don't think that you want to get caught, especially when you're in a roster that needs help across the board, that you would pass on some premium positions at 11 just to fill that need at wide receiver. I think that's why that's why you're willing to listen to trade offers instead of just take Marvin Harrison Jr. Because I think if that's the case, if you're just going to take one at 11 and it's not one of the top 3 guys, why not just stick and pick and take the guy at 4?